Hello, my guest today on Ազատություն TV is Mr. Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator in Armenia. Mr. Sharp, thanks for coming to Azatutun. All over the world,
my pleasure.
All over the world, UN agencies now are working on implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, or as you call them, SDGs. Did Armenia finally manage to localize these goals?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me say բարև ձեզ and 12 tvek ansnal anglareni. I think absolutely, as you note, last week was a very, very big week globally for the Sustainable Development Goals. We had the 74th UN General Assembly, and packaged around that a very special series of 3 additional summits. You had the summit on climate action, and I'm sure everybody watching this program has seen some of the climate strikes that have been ongoing globally through civic action. So there was a nice synergy, I think, between those two. Also a summit on sustainable development, talking about looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, and then as well the summit looking at the financing needs to deliver those goals. So I think we have the UN system here. We have been working with government, with civil society, with all stakeholders really to promote the Sustainable Development Goals. But I would underline that really the SDGs, as we call them, are nationally owned. So they don't belong to the UN at all. This is about member states, about governments, and about people, civil society in countries taking these issues forward, and we're there to help support and facilitate. So here in Armenia, I think we're in the process of what we call nationalizing the Sustainable Development Goals, because the SDGs are a package of 17 different goals that really help balance countries' policy, let's say, mixes towards sustainable development. And those were developed over a period of, you could say, sort of 5 years with some of the world's leading thinkers in development. But they are, generic, let's say, at the global level. So they have to be tailored to the specific situation of each country. So, a lower income country is very different from a higher income country or a middle income country such as Armenia. So this is the process that we are engaged in now.
Did the changes in government somehow make it difficult for the UN to work with the governments in order to localize the goals? Because we had 3 different prime ministers during the last 3 years.
Absolutely, and I actually, I arrived in March of 2018, so just in time to witness the biggest change, the most exciting change, what is often called the Velvet Revolution. And I think there basically we have changed course a bit, but I'm very, very encouraged and excited about the path that we're on right now. First of all, actually as the first Deputy Prime Minister Mirzoyan said at the UN last year, just following the change in government, that the greatest accelerator for sustainable development is the sort of change that this government has brought, and that is a very authentic focus on transparency, on accountability in government, on strong democracy, on citizen voice, free press, all of these sorts of areas. This is the greatest accelerator, and the rest can fit nicely. So that's where we're working with government now, and as the Prime Minister Pashinyan said in New York last week, we are in the process of supporting the development of the new Armenia Transformation Strategy 2050. This is a process that has been launched by the government, so we are working very closely with them to try to help ensure that the best thinking, the most relevant SDGs, targets and indicators are in the center of that process.
So when we talk about SDGs, it's almost impossible to bypass the Amulsar issue, which is a big issue today for the Armenian society. Protecting the biodiversity is among the SDGs, right? So would you agree that Amulsar mining project somehow contradicts the SDGs or not?
Well, it's obviously a very, very complicated and very hot topic at the moment, no doubt about that. I would probably, as they say, need the wisdom of Solomon to be able to answer your question fully. But clearly, the extractive industries, I mean, this is a sector, generally speaking, which really hits at the very core of what how we describe sustainable development. So sustainable development is basically the balance between three principal, let's say, spheres. Of course, the economy, economic growth, which is how we drive increases in well-being and inclusion. Secondly, of course, the environment, environmental sustainability. This is the big focus of the world right now, and in the age of climate change, we have to really put that at the top of our list. And social sustainability, right? So all three of those have to come together. Now, that particular issue that you've mentioned, Amosar, I mean, this is obviously a sovereign decision. I know it's incredibly complex because you have issues of foreign direct investment, you have issues of contractual obligations, you have issues of the concerns of citizens in the community. Armenia is certainly not alone in facing these issues. I mean, every country in the world practically is facing these issues. But I think, generally speaking, the government and the Prime Minister very correctly pointed out earlier that for Armenia to achieve its vision, its aspirations, it needs to diversify its economic path, diversify away from extractive industries. So I think that's where fully agree that a lot of emphasis needs to be placed on that, and that is happening on focusing on the technology sector. I mean, it has such a vibrant, robust, growing technology sector, focusing on small and medium enterprises. As a small country, clearly export in different areas, such as textiles as well, and there are other areas need to be focused on, and government is doing that. So what I can say is that because this is such an important and complex issue faced by many countries, there are a lot of efforts globally to try and unpack the issue and try to find a good solution. For example, the UN and UNDP are working with the Sustainable Development Networks, Solutions Network, exactly on how to deal with extractive industries, because it is such a vexing challenge, and how to strike that right balance. There's also the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, IATI, which is also very important in terms of making sure that industries are behaving properly and are owning up to their obligations in terms of contracts. So at present, I would just put it as we are very much keen to work with supporting communities to find the best path towards sustainable development, and it's a challenge that all of society has to take on together.
And going on, it's been 1.5 years since the Armenian Revolution. Do you see really big changes in Armenia or not? Because, you know, there are people in Armenia who say nothing actually changed, and there are people who say so many things changed in Armenia.
Right. Well, I think looping back a little bit to the first question, first of all, I'd say absolutely major changes have taken place. And this was recognized actually in the General Assembly last year by the Secretary General. We witnessed the power and the potential for peaceful transition, especially driven by the energy of youth. A big role played by women, for example, also. So I think, again, at that level of governance, at the level of true transparency and accountability and fighting for against corruption and for human rights, we see a lot of very, very important challenges. Now, translating that into, let's say, the economic revolution that is talked about now, I mean, this takes time, absolutely. I think there have been some important changes, but really to see the real changes, real results and impact, this takes a lot of time, and that's why it's so important to plan. And that's why, you know, some people say, well, how can you plan 10 years in the future? How can we don't know what tomorrow brings, this sort of thing. You have to plan, and all of the great sort of, let's say,
Changes happen.
transformational changes, happen through planning.
So talking about the economic revolution, as the Armenian government is stressing all the time that the second step of the revolution is the economic revolution.
Yeah.
So they are stressing on different sectors of economy, like industry, tourism, IT sector, as you already mentioned.
Sure.
Do you really agree that these are the sectors of economy that have the most potential?
I do. I think that, and actually, it's good that you mentioned that, because we have upcoming a sort of a conference organized by UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade, which has undertaken a study looking at investment potential here in Armenia. So again, really, being a small country, open borders, export is a big part of that growth, but tourism, in economics is considered sort of an export of services. So Armenia has fantastic potential in terms of tourism and ecotourism, and linking that also with agriculture and wine tourism and these sorts of things. Also agriculture as a whole, I think, is another area of really great potential. But being a relatively small country, it can't be just in primary production. We have to invest in processing technology and infrastructure as well.
And talking about the IT sector, do you
Yes.
think that the government and the society is a little bit exaggerating the potential of this sector or not?
Look, I think that the sector, the potential is fantastic. It is really, and in so many different ways, right? So definitely technology and innovation is an area where Armenia can take advantage, first of all, of its legacy. I mean, Armenia was kind of, I've heard it said, the Silicon Valley of the Soviet Union. So
it's what people like to talk.
Exactly. So
those people that lived during the Soviet time.
So there's a legacy of having, good, strong intellectual, let's say, history and human capital to draw on. Beyond that, the diaspora. Armenia has really an unbelievable, a very unusual asset and resource to draw upon. That's the diaspora. And the diaspora obviously is very much linked with the technology sector in many areas. I mean, whether it's in France or California or other places. And by the way, I was born in Burbank, which is practically Glendale, so kind of coming from that same area. Now, but I think it's...
So you met many Armenians before coming to Armenia there.
Well, exactly, absolutely. And, but I do think it's important that we have to look at balanced growth, and so we have to be realistic. So I think that technology can be a very important driver of this economic revolution, no doubt. And we can also look at how does technology impact on other areas. So technology for what? And I think we can look at technology. The UN, for example, and UNDP and some other agency are engaged now in working with innovative efforts to unlock technology, for example, for refugees. Tech for refugees, how to help bring in or people in refugee-like situations, especially young people and women and girls. Technology for development in the rural sector, in rural communities. How do you really diffuse the benefits of technology to the rest of the country? But we cannot also forget about the other more traditional sectors as
like
well.
Agriculture.
Agriculture, absolutely. Education, I mean, we need technology in education for sure. We need technology in health for sure. But we also have a lot of priorities that are enshrined in the SDGs, that are enshrined in the developing Armenia transformation strategy as well. Rights, and the list is quite long.
So going back to the changes that happened in Armenia during these 1.5 years, in response to the revolution and to the new circumstances, did the UN make any changes in their programs, in your programs, and in your goals?
So I think...
and also the agencies.
Right. So basically the UN system here, we consist of 12 resident UN agencies. And then, of course, we draw upon many what we call non-resident agencies as well. So we really are able to draw upon the world-class expertise whether it's based in Geneva or New York or Rome or Beijing or wherever. So I would say when we look at the impact level, as we were talking about before, we have not necessarily changed a lot because many of those fundamental challenges, let's say, poverty or education rates or health, these sorts of things,
they don't change because of the revolution.
They don't change overnight.
Yeah.
What changes is the way that you address them, or you can address them. But we are actually in the process now of starting developing our next our 5-year cooperation
5-year
framework.
goals, right?
Exactly. So in the course of this year, we're working with, again, government, with civil society, with business.
So when will you introduce those goals for the next 5 years?
So formally speaking, we will agree this path next year, and then our current framework runs through the end of 2020. So from 2021, we'll be operating under a new framework. This also is timed with global UN reform. So we've actually, the tools that we're using are changing, actually. And so this is it's a very exciting time, and the timing is
Changes
perfect.
for UN and for Armenia as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. We don't call it a revolution, but it is a transformation. It's the Secretary General's plan for transforming the way that the UN works. So we're actually right now in the process of learning about these new tools and really adopting the new tools that we'll have to bring to bear. But mainly it's about being more nimble, more responsive. Yes, it's a 5-year cooperation framework. Yes, we need to plan through 2030. But we do it in such a way that it's very nimble and agile
Flexible.
and responsive. Absolutely. I think it was John Lennon that said, life is what happens while you're making plans. So we have to know where we're going. We have to have plans, but we have to be very, very nimble and responsive along the way. So the timing is perfect, and we're really excited to have Armenia Transformation Strategy happening now. There's also a process of 26 different sectoral strategies being developed across many different areas of government that we're also very much working with, and we're helping to facilitate the input of the international community through what we call donor coordination, development partner coordination into those 26 different sectoral strategies. I'm co-chairing the development partner forum together with Deputy Prime Minister Gregorian on that process. And again, we're working directly with the Prime Minister's office on the transformation strategy too. So there's a whole lot happening, and the timing really couldn't be any better.
Lots of work to do.
Yeah.
Good
absolutely.
luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
Շնորհակալություն.
Շնորհակալություն.
Thank you.
Ազատություն գալու համար. Today my guest at Ազատություն TV was Mr. Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator in Armenia.